Frugal vs cheap, the difference that builds wealth. There's a bloke I used to work with, let's call him Dave, who would bring in the cheapest instant coffee you've ever tasted. I'm talking absolute dishwater. He'd brag about paying 79p a jar. Meanwhile, he was also on his third second-hand washing machine in 2 years because he kept buying the cheapest one on Gumtree. Dave thought he was being smart with his money. Dave was not being smart with his money. And today, I want to talk about why, because the difference between being frugal and being cheap is genuinely one of the biggest factors in whether you build real wealth or just stay stuck. Right. So let's get into it. Most people use the words frugal and cheap like they mean the same thing. They absolutely do not. And mixing them up can cost you thousands of pounds over a lifetime. Possibly tens of thousands. I know that sounds dramatic, but stick with me. Being cheap is about spending the least amount of money possible in every situation. Full stop. That's the entire strategy. Cheapest option, every time, regardless of what you're actually getting for your money. Being frugal is completely different. Being frugal is about getting the most value from every pound you spend. Sometimes that means spending less. Sometimes, and here's the bit that surprises people, it actually means spending more. Let me give you a really simple example. Say you need a winter coat. The cheap approach is to go on Primark's website, find the absolute cheapest jacket they sell for 15 quid, and call it a day. The frugal approach might be to spend 80 or 90 pounds on a properly warm, well-made coat that's going to last you 5 or 6 winters. Maybe you wait for the January sales and get it for 60. Maybe you check Vint first and find it barely worn for 40. See the difference? The cheap person optimizes for the lowest price tag. The frugal person optimizes for cost per use, for long-term value, for what actually makes sense when you zoom out. And when you start applying that thinking across your entire financial life, groceries, insurance, cars, housing, investing, the gap between those two approaches becomes absolutely enormous. Let's talk about some real UK-specific examples because this stuff gets really interesting when you apply it to the financial products we actually use. Take energy bills. A cheap person might refuse to put the heating on in January because they don't want to pay for gas. They sit there in 3 jumpers shivering in their own living room. A frugal person might spend 200 quid on proper draft excluders, loft insulation top-up through the ECO scheme, maybe even smart thermostatic radiator valves. Their energy bill drops, their house is actually warm, and those savings compound year after year. The cheap approach saves money today and makes you miserable. The frugal approach invests a bit today and saves money forever. Or let's talk about groceries. Being cheap at the supermarket means buying the absolute lowest price version of everything, which sometimes means food that goes off before you eat it, or stuff that tastes so bad it ends up in the bin. That's not saving money. That's wasting money with extra steps. Being frugal means meal planning on a Sunday, checking what's already in the freezer, using apps like Too Good To Go, shopping at Aldi or Lidl, which, by the way, are not cheap shops, they're frugal shops. There's a massive difference, and actually eating what you buy. A frugal household might spend the same as or even slightly more than a cheap household at the checkout, but they waste almost nothing. Over a year, they're hundreds of pounds better off. Now here's where this really starts to matter for building wealth. Let's talk about ISAs. Every UK adult gets a £20,000 ISA allowance each tax year. A cheap person might think, I'm not paying any fees on my investments, and stick their money in the first free stocks and shares ISA they find without looking at the fund options, the range of investments available, or whether the platform actually suits their needs. A frugal person takes the time to compare platforms. Maybe they choose one that charges a small percentage-based fee because the fund selection is better and the long-term performance makes up for it many times over. Maybe they use a platform like Vanguard or Invest Engine where the fees are genuinely low and the product is excellent. That's frugal. That's optimizing for value, not just for the lowest number on a price tag. Same with pensions. I've spoken to people who avoid putting money into their workplace pension because they don't want to see their take-home pay go down. That's cheap thinking. Your employer is literally offering you free money through matching contributions, and you're turning it down because you want an extra 40 quid in your pay packet this month. Frugal thinking is maxing out that employer match, understanding the tax relief, which for a basic rate taxpayer means the government tops up every £80 you contribute to 100, and treating your pension like the wealth building machine it actually is. This distinction matters for debt as well. Let's say you're looking at buying a car. The cheap approach might be to buy the absolute cheapest banger you can find on Auto Trader for 500 quid. And look, sometimes that works out. But often you end up spending a fortune on repairs, breakdowns, MOT failures, and the stress of wondering whether your car is going to start on a Monday morning when you need to get to work. The frugal approach might be to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a reliable used car, maybe a Toyota or a Honda, something known for lasting. Pay for it in cash so you're not stuck in some PCP deal paying interest, and then drive it for the next 7 or 8 years. The total cost of ownership is lower. That's the frugal calculation. Not what's the cheapest thing I can buy right now, but what's going to cost me the least over the time I need it. And honestly, this applies to some of the biggest financial decisions of your life. Buying a home, for instance. The cheap approach is to go with the cheapest solicitor, the cheapest surveyor, the cheapest mortgage broker. The frugal approach is to get a proper full building survey on a property. Yes, it costs more than a basic home buyer's report, because if there's a problem with the roof or the foundations, you want to know about it before you spend £250,000, not after. A frugal person might pay 500 quid for a survey that saves them 50,000 in unexpected repairs. A cheap person saves 300 on the survey and gets absolutely walloped 6 months later. Now I want to address something because I think it's important. There's no shame in being on a tight budget. Absolutely none. If you're on universal credit, if you're a single parent stretching every penny, if you're a student living on your maintenance loan, you are doing what you need to do, and nobody should judge you for buying the 79p coffee. That's survival. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is a mindset, a way of making decisions, that applies at every income level. You can earn 50,000 a year and make cheap decisions that keep you broke. You can earn 25,000 a year and make frugal decisions that slowly, steadily build you real wealth. I've seen both. The difference isn't how much money comes in. It's how you think about the money going out. So let me give you a few practical principles to shift from cheap thinking to frugal thinking. And these are things you can literally start doing this week. Number 1. Before any purchase over about 50 quid, ask yourself, what's the cost per use? A £100 pair of boots you wear 300 times costs you 33 pence a wear. A £30 pair you wear 20 times before they fall apart costs you £1.50 a wear. The expensive option was the frugal option. Train yourself to think this way. Number 2. Spend time to save money, but know when to stop. Frugal people compare energy tariffs on Uswitch. They check Martin Lewis's money-saving expert before renewing their car insurance. They use cashback sites like Top Cashback and Quidco. That's smart. But if you're spending 4 hours trying to save £2 on a broadband deal, you've crossed from frugal into something else. Your time has value too. Number 3. Invest in things that save you money over time. Filling up your ISA, overpaying your mortgage when you can, insulating your home, buying quality where it counts, these are all examples of spending money now to have more money later. Cheap thinking can't do this because it only looks at today's price tag. Number 4. Be ruthless about cutting spending on things you don't care about, but generous with spending on things you genuinely value. That is the absolute heart of frugality. Maybe you can't care less about having a fancy car, so you drive a 10-year-old Skoda and love it. But you really value eating out with your mates on a Friday, so you budget properly for that and enjoy every bite. A cheap person feels guilty about every pound they spend. A frugal person feels confident because they've made intentional choices. And number 5. Think in systems, not just single purchases. Setting up a standing order into a savings account on payday, even if it's just 50 quid a month into a cash ISA or a Marcus account, that's a frugal system. Batch cooking meals on a Sunday and freezing portions, that's a frugal system. Reviewing your direct debits every 3 months, that's a frugal system. Cheap is a one-time decision. Frugal is a way of living that compounds over time, just like interest. And that word, compounds, is really the key to all of this. Frugality builds wealth because it creates small advantages that stack up. A few hundred saved here, a smarter investment choice there, an avoided rip-off over here. Individually, none of these things change your life. But over 5, 10, 20 years? They're the difference between struggling and being financially comfortable. Between retiring at 67 and retiring at 60. Between worrying about money and having choices. Dave, from the beginning of the video? Last I heard, he was still buying the cheapest everything and wondering why he never seemed to get ahead. And look, I like Dave. But Dave was playing the wrong game. He was winning every individual battle, lowest price, every time, and losing the war. Don't be Dave. Be the person who thinks about value. Be the person who plays the long game. Be the person who understands that the smartest thing you can do with your money isn't just spending less of it, it's spending it well. If this video helped you think differently about how you spend, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We put out new videos every week on how to make your money work harder, properly, practically, no nonsense. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the most frugal decision you've ever made? I'd genuinely love to hear it. And if you want to take this further, I've got a video right here on the screen about the biggest money mistakes people make in their 30s and 40s. It ties in perfectly with what we've talked about today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.